Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. My name is Chris. This is one in a series of videos in which we walk through the entire process of Google Analytics for construction, from track and code placement to Looker Studio build out, which we're going to talk through in this video. In exchange for my services on this particular project, the Maui Humane Society has allowed me to share videos like this one. So really this one is all about getting the data out of GA4 and into a tool like Looker Studio or a dashboard tool. We are going to focus on Looker Studio for this particular video, but just know that there are several other data visualization platforms or dashboarding tools that you can utilize instead of Looker Studio, which is formerly known as Google Data Studio. Why do we do this? Number one, sometimes the data isn't actually very helpful or readable, or sometimes our reporting audiences need to see the data in something a little bit more friendly than what the reports in GA4 provide. We also want to produce reports that answer three main questions or meet three primary qualities or objectives. That is accuracy. Are we providing precise, clear data? Is that data clear? Is there clarity? Is it understandable? And sometimes to get into a dashboard is very helpful to solve for that problem. And then we want to prioritize metrics. So ideally our dashboards kind of sit right in the middle of this little Venn diagram we've got here. Now dashboard creation is not necessarily an easy process, but it is a definable one. In my experience, I found that this step-by-step configuration process is most helpful. This is what I rely upon from my clients when we're building out new dashboards from scratch, whether it's in Looker Studio or a different tool set. We always go back to the primary goals or the primary objective. What is it that we want to report on? What story do we want to tell? We must prioritize those data points. So number one, once we figure out what it is we want to show, sometimes we have to figure out what we want to show first or foremost or at the top of the report or at the bottom of the report, that kind of thing. I personally find it helpful to create a sketch. So I have little 3x5 note cards all over my desk in which I will basically build out a sketch of every report that I build out before I build it out online. It just helps me kind of build out a blueprint for what I want it to look like or what I think my clients or my reporting audiences might need. And then we configure the data sources. Now there is a previous video in this series that talks about prep, and we'll talk through how to kind of identify your data source, whether it's Google Analytics, Google Ads, Google Search Console, or some other data source, whether it be an advertising source or an email marketing source or whatever, that you can basically hook up to your Looker Studio dashboard. I always feel that it's important to customize the theme and the styles. None of my reports look like my brand because they're not my reports, they're my clients' reports. And so you'll definitely want to think about how to align, whether you're an in-house marketer or if you're an agency or it's providing services. I would always recommend that you build out the report in the likeness of not your brand, but your end client's brand or the audience's brand. Now, if you're in-house, that is your brand, so that should make sense. But you can bring over colors and styles and fonts and all those different types of things to make sure that your report looks just like every other, or looks very similar and lines up with other assets within the portfolio. You can hear my coworkers in the background. They get very excited about dashboards. You can also create and edit the layout. So we're not going to do the editing piece in this particular installation or in this particular video in this series, but we will create a report from scratch and go through that process and put together a couple different graphics for you. Okay, so to go back to the start, primary goals for Maui Humane Society. A previous video in this series discussed this, but just to kind of provide a refresher and a reminder so all this makes sense while we're building this out, we want to focus on the key areas for Maui Humane Society for this dashboard that we're going to build out. For Maui Humane Society, those areas are adoption, fostering of animals, volunteer time, so people who are lending their time and resources to volunteer, and then obviously donations. Those are the three or four main areas that Maui Humane Society tends to focus on. We also want to achieve cross-platform tracking, so Maui Humane Society has a number of different websites in their kind of ecosystem, not just the MauiHumaneSociety.org, but also other sites for events and donations and things like that. We want to bring it all together. We also want to inform future state of websites. So the primary report might not necessarily do this, but other reports that we can create with respect to UX, navigation usage, content acceptance, where people are going, where they're not going, features that they're using, features that they're not using, will help to inform a future state of the website, which Maui Humane Society is actually building out over this calendar year. And then we also want to, because we're not too far out at the time of this recording from the Maui Humane Society, or I'm sorry, the fires that occurred on the island of Maui in 2023, we still want to gauge the kind of response and behaviors and trends coming out of that. Now, regardless of what our objective is here, or for any other brand that we're working on, maybe it's your brand that we're talking about, our biggest challenge as marketers and as data visualization artists, I'll call us, is this. It's just a blank page, right? How do we get our dashboard in such a shape where we're not really struggling as to how do I put this together? What should go on there first? Should this be a line graph? Should it be a scorecard? Should it be a table? How do I build this out? Now, again, I would recommend you build out a sketch, but in doing that process, what I tend to do also is really start with a 3-step process. And that process looks a little something like this. To understand what we must report on, we must first kind of go back and think about, well, what questions are we trying to answer? What are our primary measurement questions, okay? And you might think of, 3, 4, 17, like some number of questions that can be potentially answered with a dashboard, okay, with a data visualization, right? Then the next step is actually kind of twofold. Number one, we're going to prioritize these. So we're going to make sure that the most important measurement questions sit up top, but we're also going to assign metrics and visuals to each measurement question. So for example, if this dark blue box right here represents the most important measurement question that we want to answer, we're going to put it up at the top. And we're also going to assign metric or a series of metrics as well as a visual for that. So for example, if we want to count the number of donations, for example, or how people are, if the question is, what trends can we observe with the donation activity on the website? Perhaps the metric would be number of donations, the source of donations, and the trend of donations, right? So the number of donations could be a scorecard or just a box with a number in it. The source of donations could be a kind of a bar chart or maybe a table. And then trend of visits could be a line graph, right? So for every metric, we want to identify an appropriate visual to tell the story appropriately. And again, we're prioritizing these metrics in a dashboard. Now, once we've got this done, all we need to do is essentially get it into Looker Studio, okay? And again, for all the things that we're doing with everything related to GA4, we are writing it down. If we do not write it down, it doesn't exist. So for your sake, we put together this document here. You can access it. Anybody with this link can see what we've done for this particular project. Again, Maui Humane Society has been nice enough to allow me to share this process with you. If you need your own kind of version of all this documentation, you can find it at this link right here. If you just copy a version of that, you can kind of build out your own. Previous videos in this series will kind of talk about every step of the documentation process, including the GA4 audit, a wish list preparation, Google Tag Manager tasks, etc. But again, the idea with all this documentation is if we do not write it down, it does not exist. Okay. So if we're looking at our dashboard, here she is, right? This is the final product. Now we are going to build this out during this video so you can kind of see essentially how the donuts are made. But to put all this together, we first start with documentation, right? So the link that I just provided back here is going to align with the measurement questions we've got here. So, I'm sorry, it's going to provide the measurement questions that we've identified. So to start off here, the first question we're looking to answer, this is priority number 1 because they're really about just eyeballs and awareness right now and getting the message out as to what is the overall trend of visits to the website and quality of traffic. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see that better. The metrics that we've assigned or we've identified to answer this question include visits over time, monthly visits, the average pages per visit, and then average visit duration. Now, you can see in the column B here for visits over time, anytime we see over time, well, that's a line graph. We want to see how the data shows over time. And then with visits and pages per visit, we're just going to have simple numbers and scorecards. Now, if we look at these items here, visits over time, monthly visits, pages per visit, visit duration, this is answering question number 1. As we build this out, if we look back over at our dashboard, you can see this block right here, visits, pages per visit, average visit duration, visit trend. these line up with this question here, okay? If we look at the next question, just to give you a couple examples, then we're going to start building this thing out to show you what it looks like. What referral sources are visitors using to access the website? So a big question is our SEO campaigns, our SEO program, is it effective? We're doing some social media work, we're doing some email work. To what degree are these helping out with respect to building traffic and traffic volume to the website? So we want to say, understand visits by channel. That'll be a bar graph in which we're showing channel or referral source channel or category as our dimension, and visits will be our metric. Visits by source medium, pages per visit by source medium, and average visit duration by source medium. And all of that will really be one table in which we show that. Now again, if we take a look at this, we built this blueprint out with all of our measurement questions and kind of prioritized these, identified metrics, assigned a visualization for every metric. If we go back to the report, visits by channel, and then a table of visits, pages per visit, and average visit duration. There we are right there. There's channel performance and then referral source metrics here. So this block right here is answered by question number 2. And on we go, okay? It just gets even more involved, which is, I think, a good thing. One particular challenge that we've got here is not just filling up a blank template like we've got right here, but also, if we can, and I recommend this, it doesn't work for everybody, but if you can, try and get this to one page. And here's why. We as analysts have a tendency to want to share all the data that we possibly can because we're in it, we're close to it. We don't necessarily have a beginner's mindset per se, but we are looking at every metric, and we find little stories throughout that we want to share every little detail about. For our reporting audiences, it's too much. We just need to do one page typically. And if you can succinctly gather all the core questions that you're trying to answer and summarize them into one singular page, and preferably put it all in one page that fills the screen with a 16:9 aspect ratio. Again, a previous video we'll talk about how to do this setup here and that prep work. Do it, because getting everything into one page is a service you are providing to your reporting audiences. By providing your audiences with a 6-page report, or God forbid, a 16-page report, you're actually doing them a disservice, in my opinion. So if we can highlight the most important, bring to light the highest priority elements, and really utilize our time to translate the data with written insights separately, do that, right? Dashboards should provide highlights, not the full game report, okay? All right, so let's take a look at this. Now, we're gonna move off of this here, and we're going to look at just a blank sheet of paper, okay? Or a blank report. Now, I don't even have a legend or glossary in here. So what we're gonna do over the next 5 minutes or so is I'm gonna show you how to build out a line graph example, how to do a scorecard, by the way, line graph, scorecard, and we'll do a table or two as well, and maybe a bar graph if we've got time, okay? So let's take a look and see what we've got. So again, once you've got this written out, and by the way, this was built during a meeting with the Maui Humane Society to kind of talk about, all right, what do we care most about? What are our questions? And then I, as the analyst, kind of took it upon myself to say, all right, I think we can answer this question with these metrics. And the way that we're going to tell the story is with these visualizations. So the question identification process was really done with the client. This part's done by the analyst most often. So, but once we've got this built out, the dashboard kind of builds itself, right? So let's build this line graph right here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Edit, and we are going to add a chart, okay? And so I'm going to select a line graph. Now, once we've got this, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, but if you've worked with Looker Studio before, you're probably somewhat familiar. We've got two little tabs right here. We've got Setup and Style, okay? Setup is going to help you identify what metric you want to show over what dimension. Okay, so dimensions are things like time, source, page, navigation label, channel, product, item ID, whatever. So they're all like the nouns. So anything in green, if you're more literary like I am, is like a noun. And the blue are metrics. Those are things like revenue, page visits, bounce rate, right? Those are all the verbs, if you will, okay? And so for this one, we have date right here, which is what we want. Now the metric here is going to be visits. Now see, I can see visits over time. Now, here's the trick. If I look for visits, I won't find anything. However, if I go to Google Analytics and just reference traffic acquisition and user session, or sessions is the actual metric that I want to utilize, okay? So to get very familiar with all the different metric names within this platform, you're actually helping yourself out quite a bit, okay? So we can call it visits, but in the parlance of GA4, it is sessions. We can call it visitors, but in the parlance of GA4, it is users, and so on, right? So that's kind of how that works. We can call it pages per visit, but in the parlance of GA4, it's views per session. So a lot of people ask me, hey, Chris, is there like a glossary for these metrics? Yeah, it's in GA4. It's right here. You just kind of have to get familiar with these reports first, and you can definitely identify the different metrics and dimensions you're going to want to bring into your report. So what I'm looking for is sessions, and because you can see there are dozens, if not hundreds, of different metrics and dimensions from this data source, I'm just going to look for sessions, and then I can just drag it over, and now my line graph says sessions. Now here's the thing, I don't want to call it sessions, I want to call it visits. How do I change that? Right by this metric right here, you might have to zoom in on the video a bit, you can see that we can change the name. So if I hit this little pencil icon, I can rename it to visits, and on we go, right? Now, I've got this set up. I can, if I want, apply some filters. I can alter the date range. The date range I've got here is set to auto, which means it's going to correspond to whatever date I've selected here. Again, in the previous video to this one, we put in a date control. If you're looking for the date control, it's right there. There's the date range control, and you can kind of preset this to whatever you want, whether it be last month or this month or last quarter, or whatever it is, last year. There's all kinds of different options for you there in terms of what you can select. And it will, whatever data you got here will respond to that selection. So we've just got it set for last month. But now if I want to style this, I'm going to get off the Setup tab and go to Style. Okay? And there's too much information in here. So I'm going to kind of show you where to go. I do want to show little dots for every day. So if I say show points, there they are. I want to smooth this out a little bit. You can see it's a little jagged. To make it a little softer, I'm just going to hit smooth. It's about halfway down the line, or the setup chart here. And then for my visits label, for my glossary label or my legend label, I'm going to move that to the right, okay? Now, I've already put in a headline, so I've got a headline here, a sample headline here. I'm going to utilize this as kind of a label for my different data visualizations, and this one's just going to be called Visit Trend, okay? And then I can move stuff around. I can kind of alter the way this is structured and all kinds of good stuff. And over time, I'm probably going to need to like move the furniture around a little bit more. But look at us, we're off and running. The next one, monthly visits. It's going to be the same thing. Now, here's the thing. If I want to add just a little block with a number in it, that is called a scorecard, okay? So I can add that right here. And you can see it has no style whatsoever. And so what I want to do here is, number one, it's got sessions, that's helpful. I'm going to change that label. I want to see visits versus the previous month or the previous period, okay? And so right down here in the setup area, there's a date range and also a comparison date range. I'm going to choose previous period, hit apply, and you can see that we're up about 5.8% over last period, okay? So whatever period you select here, it's going to be the previous period. So if you're choosing a month, it's going to be the month prior. If you choose a week, it's going to be the week prior. If you choose 3 days, it's going to be the 3 days prior, okay? So you can kind of pick and choose what you want there. Now from a style perspective, let's give this thing a little border, okay? And we're going to stick with our kind of color palette that we've already created again in a previous video. Let's give that thing a little bit of a curve to it. We can move some things around. I don't love the padding on that thing, so I'm gonna control the padding a little bit. So padding's way down here, and I'm moving quickly so you can kind of pause and go back, but there's, again, like I said earlier, there's way too much stuff in here that you can alter and rearrange, okay? Now the nice thing about this is, like, there it is, there's my scorecard. Now I could add another scorecard and have to do all those styles again. So to avoid kind of recreating the wheel every time for every scorecard I create, if I've got another scorecard, which I do, I can then go and say, let's just Control C, Control V, copy and paste, or Command C, Command V if you're on a Mac. And then I'm just going to swap out the metrics. So this one, if I look back here at my glossary, pages per visit is views per session, okay? So if I go views per session, just find it, and then I can just drag it over. The other thing I can do here is if I click this right here, I can look for it in here and find it. There's a few different ways to kind of arrive at the same destination. I don't love the views per session label, so I'm going to change this to something a little bit more friendly. Pages per visit. And there's a couple of scorecards, okay? To keep this train rolling, I'm actually going to skip ahead to some of these other visuals that we've got here. Let's do the channel performance one. You can see I've got a little heading right here. So let's say I'm going to take this heading right here. I'm going to copy and paste it and then move it around a little bit. And so if you get all of this done in advance, you're kind of just following directions, and it can be very Zen-like, right? You kind of get on a roll, and it's actually, if you're sick like me, it's kind of fun. Channel performance, okay? So for this one, what we're going to do is we're going to add a bar graph according to our list here. Again, if we don't write it down, it doesn't exist, and writing it down in advance is going to save us a ton of time and energy and so on. So let's add a bar chart. There she is. Do that right there. Now, automatically it's giving me views per session because I used that metric earlier, and it's giving me date. I don't want that. I want channel, okay? So again, I can search over here in the data column and find channel, or I can just go right here. For pretty much any source medium channel, source medium campaign values, you'll always want to utilize the session metrics. So those metrics that start with the word session, okay? And so let me take another look at this session. Channel, actually I'm just going to search for channel. And there's Session Maui Humane Society. And then here we're going to do sessions. Okay. And again, I don't love that, so I'm just going to say I don't like the word sessions because it's not consistent with what we've got here and what we've got here, so I'm going to change that up. Visits. And it doesn't look great right now, so I'm going to kind of move some things around, kind of fix how it's structured. Now, in my opinion, too, there's kind of too many channels in here to make much sense of what's going on with channels like email and QR code and organic video and paid search. So I'm going to change this. If I go to style, I'm going to say, you know what, let's just use like the top 6 or so. And there we go. Okay. There's unassigned. We can talk about what that means, but basically if source medium values are defined, but Google Analytics 4 doesn't know what they mean, it'll come in this unassigned. There is a way within GA4 to update the channel definitions if you do see that. So if you go to channel groups, you can update your own channel definitions to get rid of unassigned. That's retroactive, by the way. So if I go in and find out that like some source medium combination that the team has been utilizing does not fit in one of the predefined channel groups, I can do that. Or I can update that, and it'll be retroactive, so that's kind of nice. Again, I want to move my visits legend label here to the right, and off we go. All right. So we've got some things going on. All right, I'm going to take all this. I'm going to highlight both of those and move them up a little bit. You'll get used to the functions the more you kind of play with this platform. The next one I'm going to do before we move on here is a table. Okay. And so the table I want is going to have one dimension, source medium, and 3 metrics. Anytime you've got one dimension and multiple metrics, you're going to want to use a table. All right, that's kind of how that works. So let's add a table, and we'll just plop it right in there. And again, I've already done the work to basically put the styles and the fonts and the colors that I want in here. That's been done in the theme and layout area, so I can customize all the different color palette and the fonts that I want to use. So if you do that in advance, every new chart or graph you introduce will automatically adhere to the theme and layout that you've selected. Okay, now straight away it's already choosing this channel. I don't want that because I do want source medium. And again, typically if you're going to use any source medium channel campaign, always use a dimension that starts with the word session. So we're going to search for source medium, and here I've got session source medium. When you get old like me, you're going to have to use your glasses on this part to see what's going on here. Now the metrics that I want to utilize are visits, pages per visit, and average visit duration. Okay, so let's see what we got there. For visits, that should be pretty easy because it's already there. So we can say visits. Okay. The other metric that we're looking for here is, if we go back to our source medium tab in reports, again, this is kind of our glossary to make sure that we're using the correct dimensions and metrics, is views per session. So I can search views per session, but we're going to call that pages per visit to align with what we've already got up here. Okay, and you can see that building out. The next one's a little tricky because it is average duration. Now, pay attention on this one. If I look for duration, there's session duration, and I can see if that works. But that is this entire session, and that seems a bit high to me. What I would recommend here is a special function. In the subsequent video, in the next one in the series here, we're going to talk more about functions, but for anything time on page, that kind of thing, I'm going to introduce a function. So I'm going to add a field here, so a little bit more advanced. I'm going to call this average duration. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to use the metric user engagement and divide that by sessions. So user engagement is basically the time that's spent by this visitors from each one of these sessions, or these source medium combinations. Now up in here we can change the data type. It's not a number, it's actually a duration. Okay, and then we can hit apply, and it'll actually bring in 2 minutes and 34 seconds. Now there's some formatting to do here. Let's update our styles. Before we do that, we're going to change the label here to just source medium. There we go. And I don't love these line numbers here, and I also don't like the pagination going on here, so I'm going to change the pagination by just doing from pagination to top N. It'll show me the top 100 results. And I can change this to whatever I want. I can change it to 10 or 15 or 10,000, whatever it is. And then in the style area, I can say, you know what? Don't show row numbers. Remove those. You can see the row numbers are now gone. I'm just going to double click there to kind of give us a little space. The visits column looks good. Pages per visit. I might change that to give us a little bit of room there. So from pages per visit to just pages/visit. A little bit better. An average visit duration, I don't want to show the hour. Let's make those a little bit more simple. So if I go to style, that's my 1, 2, 3, third metric in the grouping there. So for every metric we've got this, and I'm going to choose for the metric number 3, compact numbers. So that'll kind of bring it down a little bit. So you can see that if we kind of look at this closely, Google Organic is producing well over 11,000, almost 11,600 visits during the month of June at a pages per visit rate of 2.76, and then we've got an average visit duration of 2 minutes and 34 seconds from Google Organic. Conversely, Instagram, bringing in traffic, but the visit duration here is pretty low, so we probably want to take a look at that channel right there. But those are the types of things you can notice right away. Or you can report on and provide some insights on and kind of read the tea leaves and translate what these metrics mean to your marketing team and what we should do next. Now, one thing that's driving me a little bit crazy because I'm OCD is it's not consistent with the decimal place here. So you can kind of see way down here, we've got 1.44 and 6.8 and 1, right? So let's make sure that those are consistent. So that is the 1, 2, second metric in the list here. So if I choose that table, go to my style, and then find the second metric. I'm going to say decimal position is 2. That's not the right one. Let's go auto on that one. And then decimal position for metric number 2 is 2. There we go. That's a little bit better. So again, to each his and her own with respect to how big you want these metrics and what the fonts should be, the files or the font sizes. You can change all that type of information down in here with respect to the font sizes and the labels and things like that. Here it looks a little small, but when you do open it up on the big screen, especially if you're presenting on a television or a boardroom or whatever, or even just like a large computer screen, it's not that bad. You can kind of see what's going on in here. So, but that's the idea. Going forward, what we'd want to do is, again, follow our recipe that we've written down that's based upon all the different questions that we're trying to answer, and then build out a full report, okay? So once you've got it done, you can start making decisions, writing things down, making observations, providing insights, making decisions, and then modifying your marketing campaigns or improving upon your performance, etc. That's the idea. So we can kind of build this out in the likeness of our business objectives and our primary mission, and then over time improve upon the metrics and get better all the time, which it looks like these guys are doing, which is nice. So that's it for this one. Thank you very much for your attention. If this video was helpful to you, please consider donating to our friends at Maui Humane Society, and thank you for watching.